Well, it's like deja vu all over again. That's right. It's Friday afternoon, really live here at Pro Cannabis Media. This is the Green Rush Live talk show where we talk about the cannabis business with leaders and advocates and people who've survived tremendous trauma. In this particular situation, we're welcoming in my guest host as sometimes regularly now, Doug Miller from New Jersey. I'm not sure I introduced myself, but I know my man Dan probably put Jimmy Young, founder of Pro Cannabis Media, along the bottom. Hi, Doug.
How are you, Jimmy?
Good. And I'd also like to bring in the CEO of MaryMed. His name is Jon Levine. He's originally from Needham, Massachusetts, which is where I spent quite a bit of my time over the last few decades, let's just say. Jon, thank you so much for joining us here on Friday afternoon's Green Rush Live.
Thank you, Jim, and it's great to be here.
All right, so careful what you wish for, I think, sometimes when it comes to management in the cannabis space. I mean, you know, you are now a official CEO of MaryMed. And by the way, deepest condolences for the loss of Bob. I got to know him a little bit in various trade shows and what have you. And I was kind of shocked like all of you. And I understand you were best friends with him.
Yeah, Bob and I were very good friends. We met at Blue Hills Country Club playing golf about 21 years ago, and grew into friends and then business partners, which we did business for just about 20 years in multiple adventures and got into this cannabis business. I just want to correct one thing. I am not officially the CEO as of yet. I am still the interim CEO president.
Yeah.
But
so is Joe Missoula. Okay, so I get it, the interim thing. I actually show respect. I don't believe in it. You're doing the job. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is, but I understand why, and I appreciate the sensitivity there. And now that I know it's Blue Hill Country Club, after the interview, we are going to play Do You Know? Okay?
We all know.
Absolutely. Oh my God, that's so funny. But I want to talk a little bit about being the interim CEO, okay, you happy now, of an MSO, a multi-state operator. You know, in this day and age, with all the doom and gloom prognosticators out there, the MSOs are becoming a very easy target for the rest of the industry. How are you dealing with, and A, do you feel like you're under attack at all? And B, what differentiates your MSO from others?
Well, first I'll say that, you know, even though we're an MSO, we're still one of the best kept secrets in the industry. You know, Bob and I are probably more of an old timer in this industry. Bob and I got involved in it well over 10 years ago, probably about 15, 16 years ago, started in California in the San Jose area in Aptos, built out some grow houses there and a dispensary, got into the industry before there was an MSO. And eventually we started advising in this business. And that's really what differentiates us. We got into this industry first with the mission of helping people. This was a medical industry. There was no rec. We weren't even talking about rec. But Bob and I really saw the ability of helping people every day make their lives better. There was a real use for this medicine. And I call it medicine because it's exactly what it was to a lot of the patients in the beginning of the cannabis industry. I just remember helping people, especially when we opened up our first facility in Delaware, and I stepped in to run the register, and this poor guy telling me his story about how happy he was to be there, that he didn't have to get rolled in the back alley. He really meant it. This poor guy was in a wheelchair, only able to move his fingers and his eyes and speak, and basically came in for the safety. Paid for his medicine by me reaching into his front pocket, taking the money out, counting it for him, putting the change, bringing the medicine around to his wheelchair and putting it into his wheelchair. That's what this is about, helping people, making their lives better. That's what makes us really different than most of the MSOs. Bob and I have been in this for so long that was our first mission, was to help people every day. That started it. Secondly, we built this company, just as I said. We opened up from the ground up, writing applications, teaching these people that we're partnering with to write the applications, building out the facility, training the people from our experience that we learned in California. Yeah, did we do everything right? No, we did a lot wrong in California. But every year we got better and better, and we were able to create a business that was a real business. I know that people used to just walk around thinking, oh, cannabis is a fun thing to get high and sit around and just chill out and listen to music and munch. But the fact is that there was more to this. And Bob and I created it. We went to the first business shows and we were wearing suit and ties, and people were like, hey, what are these guys doing? Who are they? Are they the police?
It's right. You look like narcs. You dress like that. That's what everybody freaks out about, right? Yeah, I get it.
Exactly. And today, you know, we go to the same shows. Everybody's dressed up as I am today, and you are also wearing a shirt and a sport coat, slacks, and it's a much more professional look in the industry. This is a real business. By getting into this industry and doing that.
Yeah.
Third is what really differentiates us, unlike a lot of the other MSOs. If you look at the balance sheets, we've been very disciplined in what we do. We don't go out, we don't raise a lot of capital and pay stupid telephone numbers to buy entities just to say that we have revenue of X. We have built our revenue and our profits up from the very bottom, from the opening of these facilities, from the management fee world to the ownership as we rolled each of our partners in. We went from about a $3 to $6 million business to now we're 130 plus million, and we're going to continue to grow. Why? Because we know how to do it from the beginning. When we bring our partners in, they're all profitable, they're cash flow positive, and there's not a lot of people in this industry that can say that they have cash flow positive. We have. We've done it successfully every year. And fourth, and probably one of the most important pieces that we're really focusing on the current is this industry is turning, as I said, into a real business. And we're focusing on our branded products. Branded products like Kleenex. This is what's going to be important in this industry. Name recognition, good quality, consistent products. Coca-Cola and McDonald's, they basically rolled out. What was the reason that people went to them? They knew what they were going to get, the consistency, the same product, the same look and feel. With Maramed and all of our subsidiaries, we bring out products such as Betty's Eddies, which is an award-winning brand in every state that it's in, one of the top sellers, if not the top seller. But what do you get? You get that consistency. You get the same thing with our flower, no matter what state we're growing in. When you buy Nature's Heritage, you know that when you open up a jar of flower, even if the state says you can't look at it beforehand, you're going to get that high quality, big bud, and good smoke. So those are the reasons that we're probably one of the best unknown MSOs.
There you go. Well, that's going to change now that you appear on this show. Okay. I'm just telling you that. And I was hucking Bob for a long time, and for whatever reason, he was ducking me. But that being said, Doug Miller is from New Jersey, which, as you know, is one of the newer states to go from medical to adult use. I think it's interesting. I have a feeling you too. I cringe when I hear recreational use of a medicine, a plant medicine, which is what cannabis is. Doug, I'm sure you have a question or two for Jon.
I sure do. I actually just did my high on Wall Street. So I did a stock report. I trade stocks. I did a stock report just yesterday about your acquisition, the $35 million that you were taking on. And I had a question about the processing, the kitchen facility in Missouri. And what exactly, because you were just discussing the edibles. And so I was wondering if you were taking your own brands and just processing them there and producing them, or are you going to produce other companies and brands as well in that center?
Well, right now, our goal is to go into that center. We're building it out presently. We were going in there before the adult use, and we have partnered up with a great supplier that we know that we're going to get good quality flower and trim to blast into our high quality oils and edibles. So we're going into that state. We're going to be launching our own brands at first and our own oils, whether it's under Nature's Heritage, Betty's, Bubby's, Vibations, or Calm, that we're going to go in there and we're going to hit that market with some of the top brands. And these brands have, like I said, have been very successful elsewhere. And Betty's Eddies is in such high demand everywhere. I just think it's a difference maker in the market. Our in-house gummies have been a very big success in Maryland. We feel it's going to continue. That people understand that we understand how to make a very well controlled product We have consistency. You get that great flavor, and you don't get that harsh hash burn. We've been in this industry long enough to know, how do you make a good product, not just for a medical patient, but for the recreational patient?
Adult use patient. No, I get you. You know, it just cringe. I just cringe when I hear it, because we all get it. Okay, you could use it. By the way, you could use Robitussin like that too. I just want to say, another one of those over the counter medicines that you can get in a pharmacy as opposed to a dispensary, like we have here in with MaryMed in the different states. How important is it from a ownership perspective, from an investment perspective, to actually control seed to sale and create a vertical so that you can control the entire process?
Well, it's very important to basically be able to control the process if you want to have the consistency. But it's also a very expensive aspect in terms of the grow and processing together being built out. That's not the large money maker like the dispensaries are today. However, the margins are always good if you can do the seed to sale, because you can keep your margins higher at the retail center with the 280E, that you can really become profitable. But in reality, the real answer to your question is, we're going to concentrate on getting our brands. That branded products are very important. Going into Missouri, we're not going in and buying up a cultivation and processing and retail license. Why? Because this is a state that's already been up and running, very successful, that's probably oversaturated at the time with medical when we first got in there, that now we want to just sit back, check the market out, enter it with our branded products. And if we're very successful, then we can look at the other aspects of retail and grow.
I've asked other people in this space about what is the difference in, can you put a number on the amount of revenue difference between running a medical dispensary versus an adult use dispensary too? Well, what is the big jump there?
Well, the big jump there is the number of patients, and I'm going to use Massachusetts and Maryland as an example. Both are two states that went from the medical to the adult, but then had the price correction in cannabis, which is hitting a lot of these states in the mouth right now. And you saw a big price drop because there's an oversaturation of medicine on the market. Maryland is a medical only state still, but their prices have already fallen. What they're really waiting for is adult use to come in. Those prices will go back up. The difference is, with adult use, you still have a lot of people with the conspiracy theory that don't want to get their medical license because they think that everybody's watching them and that the government tracks how you live when they see that you have your medical card. And that does scare people from getting their medical card. If you get sick and you go to the doctor and they give you a prescription, people don't understand. All those prescriptions in those pharmacies are all trackable by the government. It's no different. Only difference is that you don't have to register to buy it. You know, you brought up the cough syrup. I mean, think of it. The alcohol industry is another entity that's really like this business, but doesn't get controlled like we do. Cough medicine has a lot of alcohol and has other items in it, such as melatonin, to help people sleep or get to sleep when they're not feeling well. It's not different than what we're doing. It's just that we are the most regulated industry in the country.
Oh, you think?
No.
It's funny you mentioned the cost of a medical card. You know, in Massachusetts, it's between 150 or 125. And sure enough, I go to a dispensary today, and one of the workers there is trying to tell me it was $350. And I'm like, I don't know where you go, pal, but that's a lot more than I've paid every year. And I've had my medical card since the first week that you were allowed to do that, because of my horrific my arthritis and 4 surgeries in 22 years. We don't need to talk about my body. Let's let it go. Let it go. Let it go. I use it medicinally. And I preach that as well. Doug, you get another one for John?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on something that John had mentioned, because I find it fascinating from the seed to dispensary type of model. And the cost, you said, it costs a fortune to grow. People don't understand what it costs to grow quality cannabis. And I know the markets are saturated with all kinds of cannabis, but to make the proper medicine with the proper quality. You need quality cannabis, and you need the right growers. You need all it's not exactly an easy process. And so when you discuss that, how much does it, a general ballpark, as the overhead for just a grow facility for something that you're doing in one state? Because it's just fascinating to me that it costs so much money to grow.
It's not the ongoing cost, it's the capital cost you have to put into a cultivation and processing center. I mean, people are putting in anywhere from $200 to $300 a square foot to build out these facilities. I have been doing real estate and real estate construction for many years. And 10 years ago, I started out doing them for under $100 a foot. And with inflation today, we're up to about 170 to 175 a foot. We're still below the industry, but why? A lot of people go and they listen to these high-priced architects and engineers telling you you need these extra things, bells and whistles, to build the Taj Mahal. Well, we're building a manufacturing facility that is a state-of-the-art, cleanest facilities around, and we do it with individual systems. I know a lot about systems for HVAC from my years of running office and wholesale and retail businesses, and I understand how to build a facility. And we've been very lucky. But you're putting into, like, in a facility like Maryland, that was close to $19 million to get that facility up and running. Massachusetts, with buying the building, all the equipment, was pretty much around, let's say, 10 to maybe 12 million. But those facilities, it takes 7 years, probably 5 years to turn it, to get your money back. And it's got to be patient, but you got to know what you're doing. You don't want to overspend. And that's where a lot of these growers go in there, they overspend, and then they have to drop their prices because they have to produce so much medicine to be able to make their monthly payments. We've been very fortunate that we've been very disciplined in our financial approach to everything, down to the building out of our dispensaries, to building our cultivation and processing. And we were probably one of the few groups at the very beginning that were getting standard mortgages. We all talk about banking and how difficult banking is. But banking really is not illegal. You just have to find the right banks that understand that. The problem is that 90% of the cannabis industry won't ever find that type of banking. We have been very fortunate through mine and Bob's years of connections that we were able to luckily find local banks that would give us standard mortgages. And knock on wood, we're very thrilled with the opportunities that we've had, and we're going to continue to do those.
You
Great
mentioned
feedback. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great, and you also mentioned the word patience. That is not a word that a lot of people in the cannabis industry use, because most of them that have started up or what have you are beholden to the investors and on their boards. And, you know, some of them, like Curaleaf, they're out of California now. So, I mean, even the biggies have to adjust and improvise and adapt. How patient is your group?
Our group is one of probably the most patient. We had the opportunity to go to Canada at the very beginning of the boom when everybody was raising money. We were already on the OTC here in the US, and we didn't see the benefit of going to Canada and dealing with all those crazy investment bankers to try to raise money, which they did successfully. And that's why we have a lot more MSOs, and we have a bunch of companies that have a ton of cash that they've blown through. And what do they got? They have a lot of non-performing operations that are just break even. And we've done it the slow, easy way. We've had opportunities to go into California. Well, I told you we started in California, but you don't hear MariMed doing anything in California at this time. California is a very difficult market. Was 12 years ago, still is today. We're not in Colorado. We're not in Washington or Oregon. Every place that ear just said that they were moving out of. Why? Because those are very difficult markets with a lot of people trying to put stupid prices on the value of these operations, and they're not worth it. You're seeing the price reduction in licenses coming back down to normal. And that's really what we've been very patient and waiting for, because we're prudent with our money. We just went out and signed for the 35 million, which we took down 30, but that was to do things a little bit different. We have been working this all off of cash flow from our operations and growing it, but we see that we have a bunch of things that we're trying to get open in the next 12 months. And with delays of the supply chains, we've got to have the money ready to go so that we can get these done as soon as possible, so that this year is a great year to grow, but next year is a great year of reporting to show what those growth has done for us.
Yeah. And again, you know, I'm sure you've read the doom and gloom reports. It's actually very refreshing to hear some positivity coming from a leader of a MSO, even though it is a unique MSO. What's your feeling about, you just pretty much teased it, the future? Are we going to see any kind of reform at the federal level, whether it's decrim, deschedule, get rid of the 280E, safe banking? I mean, all the things the industry really wants. Do you expect any of that to happen?
Do I expect it to happen? Yes. Do I expect it to happen in the next couple of years? Probably not. Do I want it to happen in the next couple of years? I'm even less optimistic about wanting to see it because of the fact, if you read in the Wall Street Journal and some other releases in the last day or two about the federal government and CBD in edibles and nutrients, and how they want to start the regulation and figure out what the long-term effects are and all this other stuff. That's the problem with becoming federally legal. The Food and Drug Administration, all these other pieces you're going to have to go through. Banking would be great to have, makes us more legit. Get rid of this 280E. Yeah, we'd all love to see that go. Problem is the government's not ready to handle what is the long-term effect of cannabis? What is the long-term effect of taking a THC, CBD, or any other type of edible in the long term? That's what slowed down this world in getting cures, is that we have to test everything to death.
Right. Well, that's why I'm leaving my body to science with a list of all the crap that I put in it over the 65 years that I've been on this earth. And we laugh about it, but it's true. And I don't understand, again, government delays and gives you levels of compliance and regulation. That to me, that reeks of, we don't want them to go as fast as they think they'd like to go. Let's slow them down. Charlie Baker did it here in Massachusetts. You know, he said, I want you to crawl before you walk, before you run. And it's obvious to me anyway, that those in our leadership positions are trying to do the very same thing. To me, it's very frustrating. I'm going to guess it's a little frustrating for you too.
It's frustrating in the fact that we have to fight every day to keep a bank account open, whether it's myself personally or the business. Getting our accounts closed because they hear the word cannabis, or being rejected to borrow money at real rates. What we had to sign for the Chicago Atlantic may have been some of the lowest above prime in the industry. However, this isn't realistic. I'm a real businessman, and I'm throwing up over what I'm paying for interest.
Yeah, I get you. Hey, Jon, I know we could probably talk to you for a lot longer, but we do have the cannabis industry and cannabis tourism industry waiting on hold. And that's going to be an interesting discussion on the next hour or so. But Jon, MaryMed, tell us where is the dispensary? You might as well give some plugs here for what you've done and where you are at.
Well, in Massachusetts, we have 2 dispensaries, one in Middleborough and one coming to Beverly shortly. Once the state approval, we have a delivery service with Little Dog that we've teamed up with. So we do home deliveries in Massachusetts. Then we have a dispensary in Annapolis, Maryland. We have 4 dispensaries in Southern Illinois, Mount Vernon, Metropolis, home of Superman, Anna, and Harrisburg. And then we help manage 2 facilities that we wrote applications to in the state of Delaware, in Wilmington and Lewes. And we're very proud of all those facilities and everything that they're able to do to help people.
There you go. That's Jon Levine. He is the acting interim CEO of MaryMed. I'd love to get rid of that title too, I'm sure, because he's missing his good friend. And again, our deepest condolences to the family of the fireman family and the whole MaryMed family, because I know some of the people, as you know, on your staff, and you guys are a pretty tight group. And I have a lot of respect for that as well, because there's a lot of doom and gloom out there, and we needed something positive. So I appreciate you taking the time on a Friday afternoon. We're a little late for our usual 4:20 Friday afternoon break, but we are going to take it now. I want to thank you, Jon, for coming on, and we will continue with more business of cannabis discussion on Green Rush Live after this break.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, you know, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm going to sit down in my rented car. I'm going to jam it into drive. I'm going to head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
Everybody likes to travel when you can travel. And those in the cannabis space sometimes have to be a little wary when they go traveling. And we also have learned a valuable lesson this year in the news. Try not to bring your hash oil vape through the TSA lines, because you could end up in a Russian jail, let's just say. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Green Rush Live. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and sometimes host of this show. Doug Miller is alongside down in New Jersey, and he is our keep an eye on the markets guy. And joining us as our guest this half hour is Brian Applegarth. He is the founder of the Cannabis Travel Association. Brian, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Hey, Jimmy, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to have this conversation today.
Yeah, well, we've already had one that was kind of off the record, but this one, just remember, we are on recording and all this, right? All right. What I find most interesting about your travel association is that you're actually, a not-for-profit organization. You're actually trying to educate the industry about how to handle cannabis. Is it accurate? Educate.
That is correct. Yeah, we're a not-for-profit. We're an international organization, not-for-profit. And our three pillars are advocacy, education, and networking. The cannabis travel trend is a really exciting and also a very complex space. And there's a lot of stigma to navigate. The plant is incredibly complex, packed with therapeutic compounds. So we live at the intersection of the travel industry and the cannabis industry, as well as hemp often as well. So we really try to facilitate meaningful dialogue, collaboration, networking, education, and advocacy right at that intersection.
Yeah. And you do a regular report on the state of the industry kind of a thing with data and all that neat stuff?
We do. Yeah. The organization was started, I founded that in 2017, right at the end of the year before it legalized in California. So we're in our 6th year. We're very proud of that. It wasn't an easy haul at sometimes with COVID and all these curveballs that we have today. But we have an amazing team and amazing talent that have come together to make this all happen. So yeah, we have some things that we hang our hat on. What you just mentioned is our annual cannabis travel data report. And this is our 3rd one. We put it out every year, and it's the latest data and information around the cannabis travel trend. We've had data points that really speak to the economic power of the visitor spend in cannabis shops and lounges, and also the multiplier. There was some really interesting data that came out just this past year with Forbes, where for every dollar spent in a cannabis shop, that's a visitor dollar, there's an additional $2.80 injected into the local economy. So it's a little different than the resident spend, because people, when they're traveling, the psychographics, how they spend while they're in market, is a very compelling conversation, and it's very powerful for tourist destinations.
And of course, the rules change pretty often, pretty regularly now.
Yeah.
You know how excited I am about the U.S. Virgin Islands making it legal. And, in my dreams, I hope to get back down there. Doug, I'm sure you have questions because there's a million questions you could ask about travel and cannabis. So I'm going to let you have a couple of minutes here. Go ahead.
You guys track exactly like how many arrests or problems the TSA has with just cannabis in airports across the country? I'm just curious.
We don't. A lot of our work is about talking about what is possible, and also bringing the data, making the compelling case to the travel industry of why the cannabis travel audience matters, because they're looking for experiences like farm tours, spa experience, cannabis and culinary. Cannabis is a complementary tool before going to an art gallery or some kind of immersive art experience. All those intersections, we're always trying to point out what is possible and why the audience and the data is really compelling. And the audience keeps growing. It grew by 8% in the last 2 years, from 29% of the active leisure travel audience in the United States to now 37%. And as education gets out and people learn about CBD and CBN, and as well as THC, but all the other molecules and therapeutic compounds that really can support well-being, it continues to grow. We also look at the different type of archetypes, Doug, of like the cannabis curious traveler versus the connoisseur, people who are really getting into cannabis varietals or cultivars, the different terpene profiles, and kind of how the terpene profiles are steering the effects and what that means for an itinerary, right? So when you're in town now, you look at your 7-day itinerary, it's like, okay, what cannabis beverage, product, flower, pre-roll joint, dab is the right pairing for this set and mindset and setting? What's the right mindset for this setting? So I look at mindset and setting coming alive in cannabis travel in a whole new way.
So
Well,
can we go ahead,
I
Doug,
know
go
that the snowboarding market is huge in Colorado, like just Breckenridge and a few of them towns. I travel to Breckenridge and
Wait. I'm shocked. You're going to tell me snowboarders actually smoke weed? I am absolutely shocked by that revelation.
I know it's crazy, but there are some amazing small little dispensaries out there, and I
Yeah.
just know the tourism for the cannabis out there is amazing in them locations by the mountains.
Yeah. Yeah. Those tourist spots, to your point, Doug. I mean, I just finished an economic impact study with one of my clients that I consult with, and 49% of the spend in cannabis lounges and cannabis retailers in this valley are visitor spends, 50%. So then when you start thinking about partnerships like airports and hotels and attractions, it becomes the visitor ecosystem becomes almost like a little bit of a different puzzle. And I feel like brands that reach out and really look for those bridge building opportunities to the travel industry as good stewards of the plant and getting it into the hands of people to enhance the destination experience are going to look back in 5 years from now and be like, wow, what a great investment that was, focusing on those industry intersections where there were synergies. And really with cannabis travel and hemp travel, there's 3 areas where I constantly see overlap, and that is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, also includes access in there. Sustainability with like hemp is a huge intersection. And then the biggest one, most important one, is well-being and wellness. Wellness travel is a rising trend. And when you layer in the fact that hemp is arguably the most powerful renewable resource on earth, and that cannabis with the right dose of THC, the right terpene profile, the right product can just help make life more sustainable and can elevate well-being. It's just a match made in heaven for the timing for those 3 intersections to really just gel the cannabis and the travel industries together.
Yeah. Let's talk about the adult playground that is Las Vegas, shall we?
Yeah.
Because I know I just read something that they are, the social clubs are coming on board in Las Vegas. And more importantly, I believe there's actually a designated hotel that's going to be a cannabis hotel.
I read that as well, which is a great topic to talk about because there's a lot of different models of hotels.
Right.
And also in this day and age, as the barriers fall, you get different types of groups that make quick moves and love that earned media and that quick splashy headline. You have other ones that do a slower burn, no pun intended, but they get all the license types and the air filtration, and they're kind of crossing their T's and dotting their I's for the long term. I'm not deeply familiar with the group out in Vegas. I've heard a couple different sides of that story. But there are hotels that are doing great work. There's one up in Sonoma County named Mine and Farm. They've been doing this for years. They grow cannabis on site and they harvest their own flower. And when you arrive, they provide you with a pre-roll as part of your experience. And they have a little wood thing. They walk around the fire pit at night, and it's part of being on site. Also, the Fairmont Santa Monica I worked with a handful of years ago doing a delivery, like a bespoke, non-inhalation, low dose delivery that was like basically positioned as a hotel amenity, like a service amenity, and training the hotel staff with SOPs and where do they park and what is that handoff to the hotel guest and how do you give them 5 minutes of meaningful education that becomes one of the highlights, unexpected highlights of their trip, right? Because this is hospitality we're talking about. And I'm really excited because it's a platform to really keep the cannabis storytelling alive of the original movement, as well as create these new age experiences that are just first of its kind, because as much as we want to compare it to wine, it's not. It's like it's got elements of that,
right.
But it's also medical. Like when they were studying the cannabis appellations of California and how to create those, they looked at Bordeaux, France, but they also looked at Manuka honey out of New Zealand and the medicinal benefits of that resource and how did they protect that. So and brand that, right? So it's an incredibly, that's why I always bend back toward well-being. It's like it centers around well-being and then it dips into recreational and leisure travel, and it also has medical travel in there, as well as groups and conferences and everything else, events. cetera.
Now you brought up something I'm going to go back to for a second here. The 50 years old and older plus generation, if you will, is the
Yep.
fastest growing demographic in
Yep.
the cannabis space right now. We know statistically now that over half of the American population that's over 21 has access to legal cannabis.
Mhm.
So as you mentioned, a bunch of industries are kind of morphing into one or going to, embrace each other. I'm guessing that's a great sign for the travel industry, because isn't that the most active travel group too? Over 50?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very powerful travel group because they're retired. People are looking to travel, and they're looking for improving their quality of life, right? So when you start stitching all that together as part of a destination, where are we going? I mean, you literally see the data that there is a very strong audience where when they research what destinations, where are they going this year on their trip or one of their 2 trips,
Mhm.
you're going to see people drawn toward destinations where they have clear access to cannabis experiences. I helped advise on a research national research project in 2020 with MMGY Travel Intelligence, and the top 5 travel experiences, none of them were inhalation. The first one was visiting a cannabis shop, was an attraction in itself, which begs the question: how are cannabis shops thinking of themselves as a cannabis attraction? And I'm talking about
Destination, right?
a destination within
I
a
call them a
destination.
destination dispensary, like Planet 13 in Las Vegas is a destination dispensary.
Excellent example. Excellent example. Yes. And they're very well built for big groups because of their size, scale, the way they present. So you have these destinations that are being built that are all cannabis focused. Absolutely. And it's a really big opportunity. And to your point about Vegas, Vegas just turned on. Lounges are coming alive in Las Vegas.
Yep.
Las Vegas, as most people know, is already this extremely unique destination that is just a feast for the senses. Everything from Cirque du Soleil to the food to walking the strip. It's an incredible, artistic, immersive destination as is. Now, just imagine how cannabis is going to layer into that. It's going to be amazing to watch happen. I think Vegas is also one of those where you are going to see cannabis live in the well-being and wellness centering point that I talk about. There's already a spa experience there that I just wrote a blog on. It's like $700 for the day or something. It's a full day thing, CBD, wellness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But where Vegas is going to be really interesting, I think, is that THC rich sensory enhancement. What is the effect pairing? As food pairs with wine, cannabis pairs with activities and experiences. And it's the discipline or the art of effect pairing cannabis. What kind of cultivar is the best precursor to what kind of setting, right? Are you going to see Cirque du Soleil? Are you going to amazing Michelin star dinner? Are you looking for a night of intimacy with somebody that you love? What is the situation here tonight in Vegas for this trip? And cannabis being an enhancement tool for that experience, I think Vegas is going to be a market to watch this next year, 100%.
All right, now we have a New Jersey guy in here. Okay.
Yeah.
And I've been to Atlantic City, the East Coast, wannabe Las Vegas, right?
Right.
So I'm going to ask Doug a question, and then you two can kind of bang it around a little bit. It seems to me with Atlantic City, has been like this kind of thing, right? And I would think that they should embrace the cannabis industry, similar to how Brian is talking about it, because it just makes sense. Wouldn't that help the Atlantic City, Doug?
It's funny you say that, Jimmy, because a few people have asked me about investing into the lounges because now they're legal in Jersey. And I said, first place we should approach is Atlantic City. Let's talk to the mayor and the administration and find out, because they have to practically like give it away to you, because it's so I mean, the casinos are in terrible shape. I was down there for a convention and I just happened to walk over to the casino to get some dinner. And I mean, it was literally, the whole thing was like dead. There was like 4 tables open. And I mean, that's like every casino except for like Friday and Saturday night. They actually have a little crowd. So I've been saying it for a while. They need to really embrace the cannabis industry. I mean, they have one dispensary there, and New Jersey's really tough too because of how our laws are. They don't let you just have dispensaries all over. But I think the lounges, like you were saying, Jimmy, they need to really focus that in Atlantic City to get that area pumped back up because it's in bad shape.
Yeah. It's a great, Brian, you see it as an opportunity for the travel industry too, I would think, once they get up and operational.
You know, and it is. And to kind of your and Doug's point, cannabis and hemp are an opportunity for a reimagining. It's a differentiator right now. So destinations that are in dire need of a new narrative or something that will put them back on the map to boldly step into this space, knowing that there's only 3 states left in the U.S. that don't have any legal laws. That statistic blew me away last week. Whether medical or recreational adult use, there's only 3 left that don't have legal cannabis in some capacity. That's it. So it's not going to stop heading this direction. Plus, hemp is federally legal. So what is your plan? If you're a destination like Atlantic City, how are you educating yourself, understanding the opportunity, understanding the audience, and making brave and bold moves to uplift your destination, help develop workforce, bring economic impact? There's a lot of destinations now that are looking at cannabis and hemp through 2 lenses. One of those is a destination industry development lens, and the other one is cannabis travel visitor economy lens. Because, you know, how do you some are just more cannabis travel, but there's other places where you have both. Like, you know, Santa Rosa is a great example in Sonoma County. Desert Hot Springs in Coachella Valley is a great example where you have, you know, they had the first licensed indoor cultivation in the state of California. They have a very robust industry, and they're boldly stepping into cannabis, spa, and wellness as a amazing part of the future of the experience of that destination. So their opportunity is all over the place, Jimmy. It's just who's going to be proactive and brave enough to really meet this head on and do amazing things with it. And people are. That's the exciting part, is travel is now meeting this head on. There are destinations that are trend-setting destinations that have cannabis programs now that are fully functioning.
That's great. I can't believe I lived to see this day, to be honest with you. I mean,
You and me both.
Yeah, I know. It's like, how did this happen? How did this happen? There's also another cottage industry in the travel world, the bed and breakfast, the inns, the small operators out there. How many? I mean, I'm guessing you have chains in your association, but I'm going to guess there's a sizable amount of small innkeepers and small hoteliers. Yes.
Yeah, we have interaction for sure. We have members, of course, destinations and hotels. And then we have a lot of people who attend either our annual symposium summit that's coming up. The Cannabis Travel World Fair is happening actually on February 7th and 8th in about 10 days from now. And there'll be a lot of people that are attending that for the networking as well as the education that are hoteliers, boutique hoteliers, bed and breakfast. And of course, a lot of brands, lounges, retail shops, tour operators, and more.
Yeah. And I don't know the answer to this next question, so I'm going to quickly ask it. Are you getting accepted by the biggies, the Marriotts, the Hiltons, the Ritzes, you know what I'm saying? I mean,
I do know what you're saying.
And are they, you know, I'm sure they're treating it as a necessary issue that they have to address, but they probably don't want to. Am I right?
Yeah, but your timing is so opportune, man. Like I've been watching this. I've been in this, again, since 2013, 2014 is when I started in cannabis travel and tourism. And I was always wondering when that first chain hotel, and then when the Fairmont Santa Monica came in, you know, they were early, but that lifted off. But just actually recently, I can't announce it here right now, but there's one of the larger hotel chains is now starting to carry some hemp CBD products in their sundry shop and things like that. So you're going to see, I think 2023 is going to go down as really the lightning rod year of cannabis travel going next level. And I think that from here forward, we're going to see a big swell of cannabis travel content, stories, you know, itineraries. I think people are waking up to, you know, the power of this and why it's important.
Are we doing any growing seminars? Is there a travel association event that will teach you how to grow at home or in a field, or are we staying away from that end of the business?
We don't stay away from it, but we look at it through a travel lens.
Right.
Right. So the way that we, program, the agricultural side of this is, oh, there's so much to unpack, right? Like in California alone, and a lot of different, whether it's a province in Canada or otherwise, you have different cultivation types. You have indoor, mixed light, or sun grown. Some people call that outdoor as well. And each of these are different disciplines. I mean, just think about the Jelly Belly factory tour, or the Coors Light tour in Colorado, or the Lagunitas craft beer tour in Sonoma County. Like, this is where it's headed from in a tourism capacity. There's a handful of cannabis farm tours that currently exist in California. That Huckleberry Hill Farms is incredible. They're up in Southern Humboldt, second generation, part of the back to the land movement, people that have lived up there in the woods with their parents who were hippies that migrated up north. And it all ties back into this legacy culture. And when we talk about that specifically, it's all about the legacy producing regions, otherwise known in tourism as a place of source, which means it has decades and decades of craft, of perfecting that craft, of breeding genetics, of optimal cure, growing with the local microclimate and the terroir. And all of this is part of that conversation, including preservation of flower. You have the cultivation, the harvest, the cure, and the preservation, right? And this is all part of that craft cannabis. And I think 2023, you're going to see an uptick in the recognition of small legacy craft cultivation and why that matters. And I believe there's a trend going toward not just how your cannabis is grown, organic, regenerative, but also who grows your cannabis. I think people are starting to understand that the intelligence of the cannabis plant and the kind of the evolutionary capacity of it, that relationship between cultivator and plant, there's something to that alchemy. And I think there's a lot of sophisticated connoisseurs are increasingly choosing to just like people go meet the winemaker. This isn't new. This already exists. It's just the cannabis version of it. It's meeting the maker,
Right. Look, the upside is unlimited. We all get that. Certainly 10 years from now, 15 years from now, it won't, you'll just accept it, right? Let's talk about Europe, because Europe too is going through a change, and more and more nations in Europe are getting more and more tolerant of it, if not flat out legalizing it, like the market of Germany and Malta, and in Spain, they look the other way. I mean, how do you see that impacting the travel industry? I mean, it can only help, right?
Yeah, I think so I did a little bit of work over in Europe, and it was very hemp heavy, right? So every country had, basically hemp was legal, different 0.3, 0.5, 0.1. It depends on the country and the point, but the THC was always ratcheted down. Yep. So, from even just an industry standpoint of harvesting the plant, with the cultivators and the people that I met there in the industry were very, hemp focused, knowing it's the same plant essentially, right? It's just a different cultivar of it.
Right.
So with like Prague, Germany, Malta, like all of these, the kind of the legalization starting to unlock. You already mentioned the social clubs in Barcelona, which are a really interesting scene. I think Barcelona is the new hotspot, and Spain is they've taken that role from Amsterdam. And I think Amsterdam suffered a little bit. It's always been kind of a quasi-legal model there. It wasn't full legalization. It was kind of this like coffee shop,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that at the end of the day, not fully embracing it and integrating it into travel and serving the highest expression of the plant as a tool for wellness and incorporating it into spa and culinary. Amsterdam kind of missed that boat. It was all just coffee shops and smoking weed, and they didn't even get that deep into beverages. I haven't been there in 10 years, but I think California is one of the leading markets today, as far as what kind of the leading frontier of where it's headed with lounges and stuff. But Europe's going to be an exciting place to watch. A lot of people think Europe's going to end up overtaking the US as far as value of industry when it comes to the cannabis industry proper. But let's face it, Europe's a cultural playground with travelers like me. I mean, get me on a place where I can drive 40 minutes and be in a different country, different culinary scene, different celebrations and ceremonies and rituals and all the things that culturally, scratch my travel itch, and layering cannabis there. It's just going to be, a playground enhanced, to your point.
Yeah. And now let's go south of the equator to one of my favorite countries, Colombia. Okay. The home of one of the great soccer players of all time. I was a big fan of Carlos Valderrama. And that being said, they too have identified that perhaps we should go legal and start taxing this plant. And they are moving towards that now. Is Colombia going to be a travel destination, or are there still some wariness about the dangers of that world in Colombia?
I think for South America, it will continue to be a destination. Colombia will, and it's one of those countries too that, and this goes for travel in general. There's always a narrative, but once you get to a location, you meet the people, you realize people are people and culture is culture. A lot of it's this fear mongering to a degree. That's, as long as you're staying in safe places and using your sense and being smart about things, you're going to be fine. So I think they've also been very embracing of conferences, and they've been kind of a beacon in that region for stimulating conversation around all this. So I think Colombia is going to be one of the ones that leads this for that region. Absolutely. Also,
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Paraguay and Uruguay. There's wellness resorts that are really kind of forward thinking happening there. So yeah, you're seeing this become a global phenomenon quickly.
And I'd be remiss if I did not mention the reggae boys, Jamaica.
Yeah.
Because it's been part of that Rastafarian world and that culture now for generations. And yet there still seems to be a power struggle going on with the tourism groups and the elected officials in Jamaica to figure out who's going to get what. And, money grab is the end all. It's the worst freaking vice out there. People just want to open up a door and get rich on this thing. And it's still a business, right?
Yeah. And also with cannabis, I mean, we got to take into account that it was a sacrament in a lot of cultures, and it was a way to connect with the divine and to have ceremony and intention. And it's not something you can just look at from a transactional, how much can we move, consumer, more is better, more. You're really going to miss the mark with the higher purpose here, which is this plant being facilitated and fostered with care in the right way can really elevate health and happiness around the world. And that will come with success. So, not that I have the equation for that, but I recognize what you just said, Jimmy, because that is something that a lot of people who have been in the cannabis or cannabis travel space, as long as I have this certain ethos that was there pre-legalization. When adult use and rec dropped, of course, there's more interest for different reasons, and that value set is a little bit different. So there's this cultural negotiation happening between, like I guess I want to say traditional, business versus purpose-driven, mission-driven work. Right. So and hopefully it finds this fair blend where we don't lose track of the responsibility to treat this resource on Earth with the reverence and understanding that it deserves, and not just plow over it because for the wrong reasons, and that includes cannabis travel.
Yeah, no, I get you. So you did mention the World's Fair, and in the next half hour, we're going to talk to Laura Hand about that very thing. You are obviously welcome to stay if you'd like, but being the head of the industry and association, I'm sure you're extremely busy, so that you're excused if you have to be, Brian. Okay.
Okay.
Just to let you know that you are welcome. And how do if people are interested, and Laura's going to do most of this in the next half hour, if people are interested in checking out the World's Fair of Travel, Cannabis Travel, first of all, where is it being held?
So it's virtual, and we pick it at a time of day when it's the most conducive for the global audience. So
what time of day is that? Because I think I know the answer, being a soccer fan. Go ahead.
It's between like 9 and noon in Pacific time in the United States.
Thank you. 12-3 in the
Yeah.
east side. Right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
World
So-
Cup
and you-
games used to be at noon and at 3 p.m. Eastern. I'm just saying that,
Yeah.
so that
That's
makes a
right,
lot
man.
of sense.
And you can find out more information at cannabistravelassociation.org. And I would want to invite everyone to check this out. I mean, if you're interested in cannabis travel and tourism in any way, we are
Yeah.
building a community, and it's a great group. It's diverse. It's people from all different kind of points of view that are passionate about being stewards of this and networking and education and advocacy around it. So, please join. We're going into our 6th year now, and we need, we need people to be part of it, and we're always growing. So I invite you to attend the World Fair, and please check out the association.
Fantastic. And we will drive some more traffic to that in the next 30 minutes as well. So Brian, thank you again for joining us. And we will continue with our business of cannabis discussion here on the Green Rush after this. Don't go away.
It's a whole perverse paradigm that feeds destruction and inappropriate power dynamics because we don't understand that we're animals and belong in nature and should be, having sovereignty and self-sufficiency and things like that. But don't get me started on politics or consciousness or strategy in the movement, because we'll lose the agronomy track and have a whole another interesting and exciting conversation.
I think cucumbers are dumb, and I think they all should be pickles. Why eat a raw cucumber when you could eat a pickle?
Having more data is always better.
No one's gotten botulism from fermentation, and it's been around thousands of years, so we got a good track record on that.
If you can become sustainable, you are protecting yourself in the long run.
Oh, we just sprayed that field, so you can't go in there for an hour. I'm like, yeah, I thought it was organic. Well, yeah, it is, but when it's wet, you can't walk in there. I'm like, this is a stupid system. This is dumb. And that's when you realize, as an organic farmer, this organic farming thing is kind of bubkiss. And then it went to sustainable. Oh, we're beyond organic. Oh, now we're sustainable. And you're like, these are all getting taken by corporations and stuff and just getting greenwashed. And you're like, no. Okay, we got to regenerative. And they're like, oh, now everybody's hopping on that now. And you're like, well, if you're not going to do it, don't say you are.
Build systems around constant monitoring of your environment, of your energy usage, of where things are going. You should be able to track down to milliliters the water in your facility, where it is going at any given point in time.
When a plant has a sheen on its leaf, that means it's fat and happy.
Oh, someone pickled purslane and people are spraying Roundup on that? That's freaking delicious. I can pick that as a weed on my farm, pickle it or ferment it, and then sell it to someone in a jar with a label, and they're gonna pay me a bunch of money for my weeds, that I didn't take care of, I didn't water, I didn't plant them. I just let them do their thing, and people were like, oh, this is fancy pickles. And I'm like, I like this. I like where this is going, because hey, lazy farmer, I don't want to do all the work. I'm gonna let the weeds work for me. I'll sell those. I'll just pickle you and make $8 for a pint jar. That's easy.
Is it a cannabis event or is it a vegetable event? It doesn't actually have to be one or the other. It's really all farming. It's really all growing things. Cannabis is agriculture.
In the Weeds, live from the Summit Lounge, is supported by Boston Gardener in Nubian Square, Boston's only organic gardening and hydroponic supply store. Let them help you grow. Vermont of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at canatrolls.com.
And welcome back to another edition of Green Rush Live, the really live business of cannabis talk show that we do and produce here on, I almost said New England Cable News, Pro Cannabis Media. It's a flashback, people. I'm sorry. I'm Jimmy Young. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. We are joined by Laura Hand, who is involved with the Cannabis World's Fair and the Cannabis Travel industry, and she's actually the one responsible for getting us, Brian. So I thank you for that, because I think Doug and I both enjoyed talking with him. Tell us how this World's Fair works. Now that I know that it's actually virtual, I thought it was on location somewhere, but it's a virtual. How did that all work?
Yeah, well, Brian talked about our different pillars and some information about the Cannabis Travel Association. And it's very important for us to be able to educate everyone around just what really is cannabis travel and tourism. That's why I certainly got interested in it and decided to volunteer. And so we, in the past, always had a virtual summit every year that went over a similar format, but we wanted to take it to the next level as we continue to grow as an organization. And we decided to do the Cannabis Travel World Fair based on, you know, the old school, like real world fair, where you would go physically to see new innovations, learn it, be inspired, be around people that were just really trying to push something forward for the better. And we were hoping to do it in person this year, but with just our limited crew and resources, we decided to do it virtually, and then with the intent of doing it at a different host city going forward, starting in 2024.
There you go. Hey, Doug, did you go to the World's Fair in 1964 in New York like I did?
I was not there, Jimmy. I'm sorry.
You weren't born. You could
Wasn't
say
even
it.
thought about.
You can say it. And I still have pictures from the World's Fair when I was, let's see, 7, I guess it would be if you do the math. Laura, I meant in before you came on, we talked about your keynote speaker, Andrew D'Angelo, and one of the founders with Steve on a lot of different initiatives out in California. I've always found Andrew to be really a great person to have on and talk to, because he has a unique perspective on it. How did it come about that you got to Andrew?
Well, I mean, I've known Andrew through the industry and community. And during MJ BizCon, last couple of years I've gone, he always has his wake and bake suite available for different people. And we started talking, both him and his brother, we started talking about different properties that they have been to and just what's happening in the world of tourism and travel and how that's going to shift perception and help with stigmatization. So we just started chatting and hitting it off and realizing that that's just yet another conversation that's going to help this whole community move forward.
That's great. Doug, I'm sure you have a few questions about the World's Fair and what to expect. Go ahead.
Yeah, are you covering different like venues like hotels and restaurants, and also like the bed and breakfasts, or is it going to be one general kind of thing? How's it broken down into segments, I'll ask?
Yeah, and so generally we're going to have a number of panels. We had a ton of speakers submit or apply, and so we tried to group some together to talk about you know, everything from dispensaries and consumption lounges and what that's going to be like, technology platforms. I'll be speaking on brand experiences and marketing around tourism and travel, but we're really excited about showing our viewers activations, we're calling them. So it's kind of a virtual passport where you're going to be able to stamp and go across the world, and we'll have them broken out into 2 different segments. So one is going to be actually multiple segments. One's going to be traveling through different US destinations. And so we're going to have reps from Northern California, Southern California, Colorado, East Coast, Midwest, and where they're all going to give a 5-minute little video on what is the state of the industry in their community, what's being built and around cannabis travel and tourism, and what's next, as well as best practices or tips for other states trying to get into it. And then we're going to repeat that, but then go globally. So we're going to have different countries, Jamaica, Antigua, Canada, India, Uruguay, Trinidad, Tobago, same format, where we're going to have them come on and talk about what's going on in those countries and what's next.
Yeah. Doug, is
That's
there
really
a part
cool.
of this industry? Wait, is there a part of this industry that doesn't like surprise you and have a fascinating history to it and the future? I mean, to me, it's still really incredible. Go ahead,
It's
Doug.
amazing that we can have all these things that are so fun, and I just love every part of it. Like travel and tourism, I never even really thought about until today, and I'm like, that sounds like so much fun. I actually want to see this now, because I want to see all these other countries and how they operate and just get an idea of what's going on in different places. So it sounds amazing.
Yeah, one of our activations. So in addition to that quick view, we're going to have 5-minute videos where somebody's going to do a personal tour as if you are at that destination. And so we really get a firsthand view of what that's going to be. And so Coral Cove Wellness Resort in Jamaica, who is one of our longstanding members, who also have,
Keiko.
yeah, Keiko is phenomenal. And she, so Jimmy, she's got a phenomenal prize available to our attendees. It's a 3-night, 4-day free stay at their Coral Cove Wellness Resort. So please make sure you attend for that. And then just like there's one wellness resort, they obviously interact and do things differently. So we're going to have a different one out of Thailand that's come on board. And so he's going to give us a tour as well of his place. So many great things going on.
Thailand, with or without the fact that they gave little plants to their entire, citizenry in that country, is always a destination, an exotic destination now for travel. Southeast Asia, is it still one of the hottest areas to go visit? Am I wrong on that?
Oh, I mean, and that's why, Thailand is trying to build up that cannabis travel and tourism because it's such a great economic driver. And so to your point, Doug, it's, a lot of people are already familiar with what it is to travel and to experience something, but cannabis just allows you to re-experience something differently, and different cultivars help you experience art and music and food differently. And so it's just a new fun way to reimagine something.
I won't lie. There's never been a time that I haven't traveled with cannabis or gone to a location that was going to have cannabis or had to do with cannabis. So my traveling has always been based around cannabis at some point or some way anyway. So it is an important thing when you're into the cannabis industry or you enjoy it. And before it was always illegal and difficult. Now it makes it's actually enjoyable and fun to go places and travel and to be enlightened by that stuff. It's really, really cool to see other countries. Like that's a very, very cool aspect.
Yeah, just don't visit Russia, okay? Could you stay out of Russia, please?
Yeah, we don't have that on the docket. No.
No, I'm sure you don't, and good for you. Is there a favorite destination yet amongst the cannabis community? I think I remember there was an island in the Northwest off the coast of Washington that has legalized it. And again, if I had done more research on this, I would have come up with the island. But I remember reading, or we had that in our news at some point. Doesn't matter. I'm not putting you on the spot, Laura. It's okay. If you had to pick one spot to go to, you had any place in the world to go enjoy our cannabis usage, where would that be?
Oh, goodness. That is
a personal thing. So I guess
personal, for sure.
Yeah.
I would really love to go just back to Europe and be able to re-experience that. I mean, I was there 15 years ago, and I just think having that lens of being able to do cannabis spas, to infuse dinners, to consumption lounges and things like that with cannabis would have been great.
Yeah. I guess Atlantic City wasn't on that list, huh? I'm sorry. I couldn't help but do that, Doug. Sorry. I didn't mean to cheap shot. It was a cheap shot. Go ahead, Doug. Go ahead. I'm sure you have something for Laura.
Yeah, actually, so with the whole thing that you're doing, the international thing, how many people do you expect to sign on and be a part of it? And how many people, like you were already saying, they have people from other countries. How many people do you actually have? Because it sounds like it's pretty involved.
Well, for speakers, I think we have probably about 40 to 45 speakers, and then we have a lot of great moderators being brought on as well. Brian had talked earlier about that data report or data publication that we're going to be showing or showcasing. So Amanda Ryman is one of our board members, and she's the Chief Knowledge Officer for New Frontier Data. And so, just bringing in that information to be able to show people what's possible, that's usually what we're getting approached from different countries. They'll reach out and say, we were approached by our government saying, we want this to be a thing, but we don't know where to start. So they're asking us to build a cannabis travel and tourism program. So where do we start? So that type of a tourism advocacy toolkit and the data report kind of gives them the tools to be able to go and start building strong connections with stakeholders and community members and just show like there really is a possibility here.
Yeah. I mean, Doug, you were so open about the fact that you've traveled with cannabis. I've got to ask that $1 million question.
Sure.
When you do travel, where do you pack it?
I always tell people, and I guess I'll give away a good secret. It's you just put it in like your deal. I always say it depends where you're traveling from. I live in the Philadelphia area, so our airport, they've made it known that they're not really looking for it as long as you don't put it next to something that it's going to set something off and set something that you shouldn't have, you'll be fine. And so I just put it in my toiletry bag, just hide it in there. I never had an issue. The only issue, it's funny because we were talking before, Colorado, the first year they went legal, I was out there snowboarding, and I always just bring stuff back. I just put it in my stuff and come. And I actually had a letter from the TSA when I got home that they had gone through my luggage. And I was like, I texted my buddy right away. I was like, yo, did they go through like inspect your bags? And he's like, no, what are you talking about? So I took a picture of it and sent it to him. He's like, no, I didn't get one of them. And they went through all of my stuff and literally they found everything. They put it all back in there. And I just assumed, I'm like, well, I guess they found that metal cartridge and it set it off. But I honestly never even had an issue. But I'm not saying you're supposed to do it, but I always think if it's just like a personal little consumption use, do they really care? I mean, I'm not trying to walk through the airport with it either. So
I've read go ahead, Laura, you probably have some insight. Go ahead.
And that's one of our sessions I spoke of. So we're going to have Lisa Snyder of Tokativity, and then we've got Joyce Sonali of Sonoma Hills Farm, as well as the Cannabis Media Council. So us three are going to be talking about that, like what can these different destinations, resorts do to help educate those traveling consumers before they come? Because they have questions like, what should I bring? What can't I bring? What do I expect when I'm there? Who do I ask for questions? Am I going to be given an itinerary? When I leave, what do I do with it? Do I leave it for the employees? So there's so many questions to be answered. And so by anticipating that and building up a good brand and marketing strategy, you're able to anticipate what their needs are, provide plenty of education so they do have a good, comfortable experience when they're there.
Absolutely.
And it's also easier to take tinctures with you and edibles as well. So it depends where you're traveling. You don't always take flour with you because it's one of the things that you can get caught with.
TSA exists for our safety.
Yeah.
Right. That's what they're looking for. Explosives, lithium batteries are what they're really, looking for these days. Right. Because they can blow up and start fires. So you don't want that. And they've gone on record to say, we're not interested in your personal usage. So yes, Doug, I too have had my bags rifled with the little note from the TSA. And guess what? If they found it, they put it back, right? I mean, that's pretty much how I felt, right?
I was honestly quite amazed. I was amazed that it was still back in the bag. I thought at least they would take it from me. And I was just well, I guess nobody cares. After that point, I was like, well, I guess they don't care. It's fine with me. I was happy.
One of my favorite stories is told by an attorney in Springfield, Massachusetts, which is the birthplace of basketball, by the way. But he told us a story about one day he's traveling with his ounce that he forgot to take out of his toiletry bag. Okay. And the TSA guy stopped him. And he pulls out the toothpaste and he pulls out the weed. And he basically says to the guy, well, you can't go on the plane with this toothpaste. I'm not going to worry about this. And he puts it back in for him. That's a true story. And that was probably, I'm going to guess, I think it was definitely in the 2000s. And I'm going to say around that 2013, 2014 year when medical in Massachusetts finally got introduced and everybody's using it. Here's a loaded question for you. What's a success? What are your goals for this World's Fair? What is there a number you have in mind? Is it just the reviews you're going to get? What are you looking to accomplish as far as a goal goes?
Well, we have a goal with the Cannabis Travel Association where we're trying to get 20%, if not more, of our membership being international. And all the constraints with marketing, it's really hard to just know who's out there in the space in these different countries developing this program or have resorts and consumption lounges or coffee shops. So really our goal is pure exposure. We want people to know what's possible with cannabis travel and tourism, because it's such a new thing, that what's happening currently in the world and what's happening in the US, and that they can themselves do the same thing. A lot of current dispensaries can certainly take advantage of this and think of it more like a destination, people coming to it, like Planet 13 being referenced, or in Vegas, like there's an expectation of it being an experience. And so dispensaries are not always the most fun to visit, and that can certainly change when you start looking at it from the lens of your visitors and trying to make that really a great experience. So goals would be certainly getting attendees to come and listen to the great content, but just having that funnel of people knowing that we exist and that we want to provide exposure to them and all the great things that they're doing.
Is the travel agency community embracing the cannabis tourism group?
Yeah, well, and I'll say that with the caveat of there's already great groups of tour operators. And so in the travel and tourism space, there's people like Victor Pinho of Emerald Farm Tours. We've got April Price of Higher Way Travels, two of them being our members. What they do is they have been in this community forever and know everyone, and they know from the consumer standpoint what they want. And so what they do is they curate great experiences based on location. So Victor does a lot in Northern California, San Francisco. And so he kind of listens to what those visitors are wanting to do, and he curates, whether it's visiting the Redwoods, plus a dispensary, plus a consumption lounge, plus, just making sure that he's there not only to show them around, but to educate. And so a lot of the visitors are saying, I'm new to this and I don't know what to ask. I don't know where to start. And that's why I'm asking you to do this. And so a lot of what he and April and these other tour operators are doing is saying, what's your level of knowledge so that I can answer questions to your level. And then the entire experience, whether it's a whole day, half day, what they're doing is taking those moments to say, these are the different ways to consume, and just walk people through step by step and help them.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people are curious about this plant medicine, and they're starting to accept it more. We all still face that stigma every day. I'm right, Laura. I mean, you're nodding because we have to. It's part of the journey, I guess, more than anything else. And I actually posted something on LinkedIn about this. Aaron Smith, who's the executive director of the NCIA, talked about if you are a pro-cannabis person, not necessarily in the industry, but you are a pro-cannabis person, you have an obligation to enlighten those that are still living in the past and talking about the dangers of it. And again, there are dangers to it. There's dangers to everything in excess. Okay. We don't like excess. We like responsible use. This is what we preach on this show. And I'm sure it's what the industry association is preaching too. And think about this for a second. For the most part, you're going to go to a location under one of these tour operators or a pro-cannabis friendly property, and they're going to embrace you. You don't have to go sneak out around the back in the alleyway. They're going to embrace it and say, welcome to our world. And it is a whole new world out there. I mean, I say it, but it's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
I got nothing else. No, Doug, you got something? I think you want to
I
ask
do.
us.
It's funny you just said that, Jimmy, because every time I travel too, I'll just use Disney World as an example. I go there and you have to go and figure out, scope out a spot that I could get up early and then go smoke there and make sure it's safe and blah, blah, blah. It's such a hassle. It's like, can they just make a spot that I could just go smoke at and not even care and just go back to my normal life? And it should be that way. I mean, they let people drink all over the place in bars. Just have a little spot for cannabis users, and that's it. It's simple. And I wish it was. I hope that the travel industry does embrace it a lot more, because it is important and it is medicinal use and it helps people. So it should be embraced.
There you go. Laura, in that last half hour, Brian mentioned 3 states that have, are still very illegal and, no medical program. I know one of them's Idaho. Does anybody want to, I think the other one is Utah. And I don't know the third one. Anybody? Either one of you? Is it Alabama?
I think it probably is Alabama. I don't think they have anything yet.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And there was a horrible incident with a veteran who was a medical user and had it in the trunk like he's supposed to, stopped for
And he
gas
still
at a
got in
state.
trouble.
Yeah, and no, he went to jail, and it's just a hard. Mosley's his last name. Sean Mosley, I think, is his name. And it's just a horrible story. We don't.
I have a question for Laura. Where do you sign up for this?
That's very good, Doug, because I was
Well, thank you, Doug. Well, let me tell you.
just about to do that. Go ahead.
Well, you can visit our website. So it's cannabistravel.association.org, where we have the schedule that's going to be updated, all the information on sponsorship, media passes, and so on. Otherwise, you can go to eventhigh.io, which is our ticketing platform, where you can buy tickets for $25 there to view the virtual event on February 7th and 8th.
There you go. And by the way, that same platform, eventhigh.io, is now listing the next live from the Summit Lounge event that we're going to be doing on March 1st. I happened to do some scouting there last night. They are primed, ready to go. They also have about 5 or 6 amazing milkshakes that looked so good by the end of the night, if you catch my drift. It was really good. Huge marshmallows. I mean, look, I'm a sugar fiend. I apologize. I love it, and I have a sweet tooth, always have. And I definitely enjoyed it last night at the Summit out in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is the only legal private cannabis social club in Massachusetts. So we will be there March 1st. We were there virtually 2 days ago when I did the special at night, but as it turns out, the snowstorm that didn't, which is why we had to postpone it. We were all a little disappointed about that, but we will hope on March 1st that we have a good turnout there, and you can get tickets at eventhigh.io. Just go to that site and search Live from the Summit, and please join us on March 1st. So, Laura, good luck with the World's Fair. Great to see you. I know I'll probably see you in the Tuesday marketing group again, because you're a regular there, and I appreciate that. And by the way, Doug, at some point I want you to come on to that group, because it's fun to be in, to see the different types of people that are in there, the different industries. And, it's about an hour. It's like an online BNI meeting, if anybody knows what the Business Networking International is. And it's a lot of fun. And this is where I found our event planner. It's where I found there's a videographer in there. There's, people that can help you out with alarms and securities. I mean, everything you might need in the cannabis space is in the networking group that both Laura and I are in on Tuesdays at 11:45. And if you do want to learn about it and maybe even get a Zoom, you can email me. I give it out all the time, Jimmy@Pro Cannabis Media. So Laura, see you Tuesday. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you again for joining us. And also thank you for getting Brian on board with us too, because he was really a joy to talk with. And we'll have another person that's always a joy to talk with. His name is Morgan Fox. He's with NORML, and he's going to join us next on Green Rush Live. Don't go away.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways, and they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
It's a whole perverse paradigm that feeds destruction and inappropriate power dynamics because we don't understand that we're animals and belong in nature and should be, having sovereignty and self-sufficiency and things like that. But don't get me started on politics or consciousness or strategy in the movement, because we'll lose the agronomy track and have a whole another interesting and exciting conversation.
I think cucumbers are dumb, and I think they all should be pickles. Like, why eat a raw cucumber when you could eat a pickle?
Having more data is always better.
No one's gotten botulism from fermentation, and it's been around thousands of years, so we got a good track record on that.
If you can become sustainable, you are protecting yourself in the long run.
Oh, we just sprayed that field, so you can't go in there for an hour. I'm like, I thought it was organic. Well, yeah, it is, but when it's wet, you can't walk in there. I'm like, this is a stupid system. This is dumb. And that's when you realize, as an organic farmer, this organic farming thing is kind of bubkiss. And then it went to like sustainable. Oh, we're beyond organic. Oh, now we're sustainable. And you're like, these are all getting taken by corporations and stuff and just getting greenwashed. And you're like, no. Okay, we got to regenerative. And they're like, oh, now everybody's hopping on that now. And you're like, well, if you're not going to do it, don't say you are.
Build systems around constant monitoring of your environment, of your energy usage, of where things are going. You should be able to track down to milliliters the water in your facility, where it is going at any given point in time.
When a plant has a sheen on its leaf, that means it's fat and happy.
Oh, someone pickled purslane and people are spraying Roundup on that? Like, that's freaking delicious. I can pick that as a weed on my farm, pickle it or ferment it, and then sell it to someone in a jar with a label, and they're gonna pay me a bunch of money for my weeds, like, that I didn't take care of, I didn't water, I didn't plant them. I just let them do their thing, and people were like, oh, this is fancy pickles. And I'm like, I like this. I like where this is going, because, hey, lazy farmer, I don't want to do all the work. I'm going to let the weeds work for me. I'll sell those. I'll just pickle you and make $8 for a pint jar. Like, that's easy.
Is it a cannabis event or is it like a vegetable event? Like, it doesn't actually have to be one or the other. It's really all farming. It's really all growing things. Cannabis is agriculture.
And welcome back to the final half hour of Green Rush Live, our regularly scheduled, really live business of cannabis talk show on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and sometime host of Green Rush Live. I am joined more regularly now by Doug Miller out of New Jersey, and he keeps an eye on the stock market and all the cannabis stocks out there in our weekly Weed Talk news show, which is really starting to get a ton of views, and we're so happy about that, because I am very proud of the efforts that the various, I would say about 15 people put it all together, and Dan French, who's the director of this show, is the one pretty much who stays up all night and puts it together just to make sure that we have a news show to follow this really live show on Fridays. That's what we do here at Pro Cannabis Media. We talk about cannabis news, policy, politics, the future, and most importantly, we talked to our friends in Washington, D.C. that are right in the middle of it. Morgan Fox from NORML is with us here this afternoon. Morgan, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much again.
Always a pleasure to be here.
So when's it going to be legal? No, I mean, let's cut to the chase. You know, there seems to be, and if you might remember last year, and we were trying to figure out when I asked this or when I threw this out there, and you actually said it was an interesting theory about how the Republican Party might want to embrace the cannabis reform movement and be the heroes after all the work that the Democrats have done. And the Republicans can kind of ride in and say, okay, now we're going to get it. Now we're going to get this one done. It does seem to feel, I mean, state governments, I'm seeing more Republicans introducing state bills, and what's going on in the federal government now. They piggybacked with a gun law. Am I right?
Yeah, so far we've only had 2 cannabis-related bills be introduced. One would prevent veterans from losing benefits if they're involved in medical cannabis programs, which is pretty much already the policy for the most part for the VA, but this would codify it into law. Unfortunately, I don't think that we're going to see a lot of movement on that in the immediate future, because the sponsor, Representative Stubbe, took a horrific fall off a ladder last week and is going to be laid up for quite a few weeks. He got real messed up, like broken femur, punctured lung. He's in a neck brace. So wishing him a speedy recovery, but I think that there's not going to be much movement on that bill right now. The other bill that was introduced was introed by Representative Mooney and co-sponsored by Representatives Massey and Brian Mast, who's the newest member of the Cannabis Caucus. That would protect Second Amendment rights for medical cannabis patients that are registered with their state and operating within state law. It's not quite as expansive as the Graham Act, which was sponsored by Don Young prior to his unfortunate passing, and is now likely to be picked up by Brian Mast from Florida. But it's definitely a huge step in the right direction, and something that I think we can get bipartisan support on. I expect there to be a lot more bills coming through in the very near future, touching on a lot of incremental issues. The real problem that we're going to have in this Congress is making space for it in committees and actually prioritizing it, because at the end of the day, a lot of the key committees are really focused on investigations and various oversight activities. So actually making space on the docket for cannabis policy reform, even with an increasing number of Republican lawmakers being supportive, is going to be pretty difficult, at least right now.
Yeah. And is it because the president right before the election, the midterm election, decided to come out and actually use the word cannabis or marijuana, and how the federal laws and the state laws need to get together, and how he'd like to get the DOJ involved with this and make it more properly scheduled, if you will, as a substance? Is it more political than policy?
I think that up until pretty recently, there were a lot of ideological issues where when the GOP was attacking Democrats on cannabis, it was because they thought that it was a bad idea and bad policy. Now the tone has shifted a little bit, so that when Republicans attack Democrats on cannabis, it's not because of the substance, but because they view it as lesser of a priority. So it's a way for them to say, we've got all these problems going on right now, but Democrats are worried about weed bills. That being said, there are an increasing number of Republicans that are supportive of a lot of these incremental changes, as well as comprehensive change in descheduling. But the margins are a little bit thinner on the right side of the aisle. And at the end of the day, when Mitch McConnell cracks the whip and wants to use it as a way to poke the Democrats, everybody falls in line, even people that are supportive of these policies. So that's a dynamic that we're going to have to continue to deal with. But from everything I'm hearing, I think a lot of lawmakers are expecting to not get a lot done over the next 2 years, both because of the partisan rancor that's going on and the very narrow margins in both chambers and the chamber split between Democrats and Republicans. There's not a lot, I think, that they're going to be able to get across the finish line. And cannabis policy reform represents a sort of a lifeline or a release valve for a lot of that pressure, because it's so popular. It's something that is supported on both sides of the aisle, admittedly, more on one side than the other, but increasingly on both sides. And it's something that lawmakers across the board can actually point to and say, we got this done. We actually legislated. Here's this popular legislation, and we reached across the aisle to do that. We can still govern. We're not just sock puppets yelling at each other.
It's a great description. It's kind of.
And what do you think? What do you think the chances are that both sides could actually get together and pass something like this?
Well, I mean, at least from congressional staff, I'm already hearing that there's a lot of excitement about the bipartisan interest, and there's been a lot of cooperation on both sides of the aisle on cannabis policy issues for a long time. But it was much narrower in terms of the number of members that were interested in getting involved. That's starting to increase. But again, the big problem is actually making space on the docket for it and prioritizing these issues, which is why I recommend all your viewers go to norml.org/act and contact their members of Congress and tell them to prioritize cannabis policy reform. Also, there's another action there urging the White House to fast track the possession pardons that were announced in October. Apparently, the applications for the pardon certificate are still not available. 120 days later.
Unreal.
Yeah, that's our government. How many layers of stuff in the way to actually get things done, and it's frustrating. I mean, Doug, you and I have had great talks about this, respectful talks, and it is again, I think that is an opportunity for those moderate Republicans, if you will. In fact, I saw a recent poll that now 53% of Republicans that they took the poll from are pro legalization. And I think it's interesting. Go ahead, Morgan.
That number jumps when you're looking at younger age demographics.
Right.
It drops significantly, even among Democrats as well, once you start getting into older demographics, and that's also the demographic that makes up the Senate. If these folks are looking at the polls and looking at the successes that states are seeing and thinking about this in terms of politics, there's justification, no matter what your ideology, to promote sensible cannabis policy reform, both comprehensive and incremental, as long as they get away from the mindset of, if party A does this, we have to do the opposite.
Right. And that's not, it's not good governance. That's not good. It goes nowhere. The idea is to find middle ground, to find common ground. And it does seem like there's enough now with cannabis reform to actually find that. They have to stop pointing fingers and labeling it and putting everybody in categories. Doug, I know you feel this way.
Oh, I totally feel this way. You know that, Jimmy. It drives me insane that it drives me insane, the politics. It's just, if they could just, and I don't care about one side or the other. I just wish we could just get together and do things for the people, because that's who they work for, are the citizens. And they need to provide services for us, and they don't. They get in there and they bicker with each other over nonsense just because one side's a party and the other side's a party. They can't agree on anything. They refuse to even try to agree. And it's just, and then the people that suffer are us. They go about their business and do whatever. They get free insurance, they get free everything, they do whatever they want. And then we're over here having conversations for years like, when can they work together and actually pass this thing along? We have the majority of the country wants it done, and everybody wants it done, and they still cannot figure it out. It drives me berserk.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in a good position because we are able to have conversations with lawmakers in a reasonable and legitimate fashion, much more than we ever have been able to. It's really considered a serious issue. You go to any congressional office and they have somebody who marijuana policy is part of their portfolio, like a legislative aid or something. And regardless of all of the politicking that you see on Twitter and on the news, the staffers feel the same way that you do. They want to see things get done. They really care about doing their job and performing public service. And I think that there are some pathways that we could get some things done. Unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately, but it creates a lot of difficulties because cannabis policy touches on so many other issues. Right. Whether it's poverty, criminal justice reform, racial justice, taxation, regulation, FDA issues. I mean, the tendrils just reach out into so many different things. So that sometimes can invite the possibility of complications, where if it was just purely about cannabis, it would be one thing. But lawmakers have to worry about their positions on all these other issues as well.
Because they're more concerned about keeping their jobs and their seat than they are about representing the people that put them there. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Okay.
Some of them are quite principled about some of these issues as well.
Yeah. Well, okay. Good. I'm all for principles, but guess what? You can't, you have to work to find a solution. There's work involved. There's due diligence involved. There's effort. And I don't know if we see them making the effort. Morgan, you tell me, they have all the staffers there that probably do a lot of research for them. And do they go through different, research and backgrounds on all these issues, or is it simply this is how the party is going to vote, so I'm going to vote the way the party goes?
I mean, some of them really delve into the issue personally, but there are a lot of staffers that get very educated on it before they start making recommendations to their bosses. And at the end of the day, I think that there are a lot of considerations that they have to deal with, but I have never seen more interest in the issue than I have now. While the political environment might be more difficult to actually get things across the finish line over the next 2 years because of a lot of partisan nonsense, we are definitely moving in the right direction in terms of the issue being considered legitimate, gaining more support, actually being able to have access to congressional offices much more than we ever have before. So in general, things are trending in the right direction. The real question is, what is the legislation that we can get passed in the next 2 years going to look like? And because of all the politics and whatnot, I think that there might be some things that either get sidelined or might not be everything that we want it to be. But overall, I think that the momentum is still there.
Mm-hmm. Now, the FDA this week, I believe, gave out some guidelines for infused food and drug with CBD. And in a lot of ways, it sounds like they just want to study it more.
They punted.
What's that?
They punted it to Congress. And, we kind of expected this. If you look at the statements that they made back in 2020, it was kind of the same thing. And I'm not sure if they punted because they knew that the folks that are negotiating at the top level for the Farm Bill are seriously considering doing a lot of cracking down and regulating on their own outside of the FDA, particularly when it comes to synthetic or derivative cannabinoids, like stuff like D8 and THCO, et cetera, et cetera. But generally, I think that this is kind of indicative of what we've seen across the board from federal agencies. They just don't really want to be bothered by it, and they want Congress to deal with it. Same thing with every single administration that we've seen for the last couple of terms. And Congress is the body that's going to have to make change in either incremental or substantial ways.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody's confident about the government's ability to do the right thing. That's sad.
Yeah, I mean, even with a supportive president who's pushing for scheduling review, that can take a super long time, probably much longer than the remainder of the president's term, even if they're fast tracking it. And even then, we don't know what sort of recommendations they're going to come up with. If they decide that they recommend rescheduling to something else, that's really problematic and doesn't get rid of the state-federal conflict when it comes to cannabis. So, and the chances of them being like, well, we've decided to deschedule it, we're going to pass it off, pretty low, I think, if you look at the history of schedule review for the DEA, HHS, and all these other agencies that are responsible for the scheduling.
Doug?
Interesting tidbit. In the last 50 years, the agencies involved have been embroiled in petitions to instigate rescheduling for 47 of them.
Yeah. Let's go to state by state, because there seems to be more optimism on the state by state movements than there is at the federal level. I saw that North Carolina actually introduced a medical marijuana bill. I saw Minnesota very close to actually starting. Are we ever going to get to the point where we have more than 25 states? We got 21 now. So, 4 more, we get to 25 states. At that point, does it change anything, you think, in DC?
I mean, I think that we're going to get there either this year or next year. Considering all of the states that are considering adult use and expanding their medical or getting new medical bills. And next year, we're going to have a lot of ballot initiatives running in the few states that still have them available. And those tend to do pretty well during presidential election years. So I think that we're going to get past 25 by the end of 2024. But just because a state has passed a certain law does not guarantee that their elected representatives are going to be out front and actively promoting or protecting the laws that their citizens or their state legislatures have passed. We still see people that represent legal states voting against cannabis policy reform in Congress. So, it's no guarantee. And that's why it's up to voters if they consider this to be a priority issue for them to get those folks out of office.
Doug, do you think that's ever going to happen, Doug?
Running in a recent election and seeing politics firsthand, like really living it. No, they have agendas and things that get carried out, and it's just the way it is. And I agree with you, Morgan. I think that a lot of the government people that they are for the cannabis, and they do agree that it should be legal. It's just one of them things that it just becomes a political issue, and like you said, it has a lot of issues that carry with it, and they just cannot sit down and agree on anything. So it just gets pushed to the back burner, and then it just never happens. And we're sitting here years later, and states have to slowly legalize it. And like you said, Jimmy, what happens after 25 states? But it doesn't. Is it really going to matter? It's just every state's going to have to be legal before they really federally legal. I mean, it is bizarre.
Yeah. Hey, Morgan, I got to ask you a question. I know you're going to know the answer to this. What are the 3 states that are still holding up? It's illegal and no medical program. I know Idaho is one of them, right?
Yeah, I think Idaho, Nebraska, and Kansas, I believe.
I see it. I thought you talked to, no, okay, Nebraska and Kansas. I believe that. Again, I went to the source. That's why I wanted to know.
But Utah's got a robust medical program.
Cool. That's great. So even though the Mormon church up there, kind of rules the roost in Utah, that they've been able to make some reforms, which I like to hear, certainly like to hear.
They came out real hard against the measures to institute medical and were overruled by the voters. So, including a significant percentage of church membership.
Right. Well, there you go. That'll teach them, I think, in one way or another. Morgan, what's the path? I mean, I was kind of encouraged in a lot of ways when I read the news that the government had tied one of these laws to gun ownership and trying to get rid of the fact that if you do test positive or you have a conviction on your record, you cannot own a gun in this country. And I'm not a big gun supporter. However, I do understand the right to bear arms. Is the gun lobby an answer to help move this? Or what other huge, I mean, we know Big Pharma has a big lobby, right? But I'm guessing that the industry continues to try to avoid Big Pharma taking over this, even the reform movement, let alone regulations and that sort of thing in the various federal government agencies.
Well, I mean, when it comes to pharma, we haven't seen a whole lot of effort being put into opposing cannabis policy reform from those companies, with the exception of Arizona a few years back. But that was a relatively small company that did donate a lot of money, but turned out was a completely corrupt company, and the CEO, I believe, is in prison now. But back in the day, we saw a lot of opposition from Big Pharma, and now Big Pharma is interested in developing cannabinoid drugs. I don't think that is going to interfere with making the plant legal and removing criminal penalties for it and creating legal access to plant and plant derivative cannabis products. I'm more worried about law enforcement, and when it comes to the gun lobby, they don't want to have anything to do with us. We really haven't bothered to reach out to them for years now, because they basically wouldn't even engage with us and had zero interest in working with us on some of these issues, even as far back as 10 years ago. Maybe that's changed, but honestly, that lobby is pretty poison now, and I don't want to really be associated with them. But I do want to be associated with protecting constitutional Second Amendment rights for cannabis patients and for anybody that's using cannabis. You don't have your rights revoked for being an alcohol consumer. You don't have your rights revoked for undergoing medical treatments of various kinds that can impair you. So you should have the ability to exercise those rights if you are a cannabis user. And right now, if you are a patient and you try to buy a firearm, it says right on the firearm form that if you are considered an unlawful drug user or a drug addict, and it even has an addendum saying, like, even if it's legal in your state, you cannot do this. And if you lie on that form, you're guilty of perjury.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, the people lie all the time these days. I'm just kind of down on the process. I'd like to see something happen, but especially after talking about the Safe Banking Act 7 times passing the House, and then now that the House is controlled by Republicans, nothing's going on, and I just don't get it. Where's Nancy Mace when you need her? Okay, I mean, she should be the leader on this.
I spoke with her staff earlier this week, and they are definitely working. But interestingly enough, back to the gun rights thing. Traditionally that was a Republican-led bill, but a Democratic Florida official, Nikki Fried, who's been a longtime cannabis policy reformer, sued the federal government in order to overturn that rule and get the firearm law changed. And Biden's DOJ has been actively trying to get the case thrown out. And in some of their responses in their most recent filings, we're basically equating cannabis users with domestic abusers who should not have access to firearms. We're still seeing a lot of the same old stigma, even from an administration that purports to support cannabis policy reform. So, we still have a lot of hurdles to get over. But the fact is that we're seeing bipartisan support for both these incremental and broader reforms. And they're coming from a lot of different sectors. They're coming from public officials. So, things are looking up, even though it's disappointing that we take some missteps and we lose some opportunities here and there. And it seems like it's dragging on and on. I think, people have to remember, like, not so very long ago, there were 0 medical states, or like just 1 or 2, like California and maybe a couple of others. When I started in 2008, I think there were only 9 medical states and no legal states. It accomplished a tremendous amount in a very short period of time. And I think that a lot of people kind of forget that, and they get really frustrated with the lack of progress year to year. But this is a long game issue.
Yeah. And a lot of the reports that have been out over the last, beginning of the year, the doom and gloom of the cannabis industry, and nobody's making money. They're going to be, a lot of these dispensaries are going to go under, race to the bottom. This is what I keep hearing in this area of Massachusetts, where they have, over 250 dispensaries now. What's your feeling, and where do you think we're going to go as an industry in 2023? Is this a growth year, a stagnant year, or a declining year?
I mean, I think that it's probably going to be a growth year if we look at it nationally, because there are going to be new markets opening up.
Right.
Maryland,
New York,
Missouri, New York is opening up right now. So I mean, we're talking about pretty big markets here. So if we're looking at it from a national perspective, it's definitely going to be growth. Forgive me for soapboxing here, but I think one of the things that drives me bonkers is when like at the end of last year, when nothing ended up passing the Senate, we didn't get safe banking. Everybody's stocks tanked, and they're like, "Oh, I put so much money into this. I'm now I'm broke, and what happened?" And everybody's like complaining about this, but the vast majority of the cannabis investing world is focused on super fast returns and thinking that this is going to be some sort of a green rush, when they don't realize or don't think about the fact that this is a volatile agricultural commodity, and one that exists in a very uncertain legal environment. And people are worried about investing in just a couple of publicly traded companies. If they were smart and they wanted to help boost the industry entirely, they would be doing microloans to individual small businesses that don't have access to capital, and boosting the entire industry, raising competition, making sure that everybody was instituting best practices in a lot more comprehensive manner, because they need to in order to survive, as opposed to survival being entirely based on their access to capital.
Yeah. Hey, you can get on your soapbox anytime you want on this show, Morgan, okay? We want you to feel as comfortable as possible on here, since you've been with us now for well over a year, and always appreciate your insight on what's going on down there in our nation's capital and with NORML. Anything special on the docket for NORML? Any events coming up that you want to plug? Anything like that?
Nothing immediately, but just to reiterate again, please go to norml.org/act and contact your lawmakers, contact the White House to get them to fast track the federal pardons, and please subscribe to our newsletters so that you can get updated on all the information that we're putting out on a regular basis.
Yeah. Now, we originate from Massachusetts, and our leaders in Massachusetts tend to be on that left side helping it out. If I go online, what can I say to people that are already supporting the initiative that will make any kind of a difference? Is there anything I can do on that?
At the state level, we have a whole bunch of actions that are
right.
Yeah, but I mean, federally, when you go to our page, it lets you contact anybody regardless of what party they are. And honestly, I think that we really want to talk to Democrats as well as Republicans, because they need to prioritize this. They can't just sit on the back burner. And I think that Democrats are just as guilty of sidelining this issue as anybody else.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Morgan Fox from NORML. Thank you again. Good to see you again. And even if it was a 1 week late, you're always welcome here at any time. So thank you for that.
Thanks. I appreciate it, guys. Have a good weekend.
All right. And for Doug Miller, I'm Jimmy Young. That's going to wrap us up for Green Rush Live. Remember, our news comes up after this show, and our news is starting to get a lot more eyeballs on it. So please enjoy Weed Talk News. And remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching, and thanks for listening.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, Massachusetts-based MSO Curaleaf is closing operations in Colorado, Oregon, and California. The Golden State is the nation's #1 cannabis market, and now is watching many of their growers leave the state. Is a market price correction imminent? Meanwhile, New York awards another 30 retail licenses as that market opens up, while in Connecticut, Republican Senate leaders are looking to shut down the new adult use market before it even gets started. Now, while Republicans still rule the roost in the Granite State, the GOP in New Hampshire sounds like they are changing their tune about cannabis reform. Speaking of change, the FDA finally releases guidelines for research of cannabis on humans. So, how do you sign up for that one? All that and coast-to-coast cannabis news on We Talk News with Elena Pinto next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena Pinto, and welcome to this week's Weed Talk News. In our highest headline this week, could CBD be getting a facelift at the federal level? Well, the FDA has announced it does not intend to make any new guidance on CBD in food supplements, despite 3 citizen petitions asking them to do so. This week, the agency called on the federal government to develop a new framework for the safe use of CBD, saying it would work with Congress to develop that framework through a cross-agency partnership. FDA Principal Deputy Commissioner Janet Woodcock said, quote, "We have not found adequate evidence to determine how much CBD can be consumed and for how long before causing harm." That means, for now, there won't be any new federal rules around CBD in your food or supplements until the government steps in further. By the way, we're still waiting on that rescheduling of cannabis the president called for. But meanwhile, there's big breaking news in the business world of weed this week as multi-state operator Curaleaf announces it will close down operations in 3 major legal markets. The company is based in Massachusetts, where it will continue to operate, but the rest of its future remains to be seen. Last month, Bloomberg reported that Curaleaf received hundreds of millions of dollars in financing from Russian billionaire Roman Abramovich in its early years. And there's been speculation about the company's executive chairman, Boris Jordan, and his alleged ties to business in Russia. But Curaleaf has different reasons for closing its doors in California, Oregon, and Colorado. And Deborah Borchardt has the full breakdown in our Green Market Report.
I'm Deborah Borchardt, and this is the business update for Weed Talk News from the Green Market Report. Curaleaf Holdings is finally exiting a trio of legacy Western states in search for better profits. The exodus will begin this month with the proactive closure of the majority of its operations, including its production and cultivation facilities in California, Colorado, and Oregon. The company cited the lack of enforcement over the illicit market and price compression as to why it was tapping out of the West Coast. The company is also laying off 10% of its workforce. They said that they expect these moves to save $60 million. New York-based Ascend Wellness announced its expansion into Maryland with its $19 million purchase of Devi Holdings, which runs 4 operational medical marijuana dispensaries. Now, the move marks the 7th state in which Ascend Wellness has a footprint. The company already has cannabis stores in Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And finally, Canadian producer Avant Brands painted a rosy outlook for 2023 in its latest corporate update. The company said they expect meaningful cash flows over the course of 2023 from its acquisition of its remaining 50% stake in 3PL Ventures, and they also expect an increase in production by 60%. And that's it for this week. Next week, we'll be watching for earnings from High Tide, Scotts Miracle-Gro, and MedMen. I'm Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report.
As such, a largely successful company ceasing operations in 3 states is sure to have an impact on Curaleaf stakeholders. And Doug Miller of High on Wall Street takes a closer look at that and other headlines that could impact your wallet.
Hey, everybody, I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Weed Talk News. MariMed, stock ticker MRMD. They just boosted their debt by $35 million with secured credit facility. The CEO states that they could have funded their entire plan themselves, but it was the right time to raise the capital and accelerate these plans. What they're going to use the capital for is a new cultivation and processing facility in Illinois, a new processing kitchen in Missouri, expanding existing facilities, and other business-related items. It closed at 39 cents today. This chart is curling up. It's looking good. I'm keeping my eye on it, and I will be watching it. And now let's move on to Curaleaf, stock ticker CURLF. They dropped huge news today. Deborah Borchardt with the Green Market Report, she'll be breaking down all the details. I just want to discuss the stock chart real quick. It took a huge dip. It hit the bottom. I'm expecting it to bounce off the bottom, but I'm going to keep my eye on it for it to pull back a little bit more. Keep your eye on it. It's going to be a great opportunity. It's going to bounce off that bottom. Huge news. Again, Deborah Borchardt will break that all down in the Green Market Report. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Weed Talk News, I'm Doug Miller.
The people of Oregon will likely be impacted as one of Curaleaf's biggest brands lives there. And that's where we find Alibi Cannabis's Marianne Kersagi with the details on another popular company that's facing legal trouble.
I'm Marianne from Alibi Cannabis with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Today, Curaleaf announced the closure of operations in California, Colorado, and Oregon. Curaleaf has a large presence here in Oregon through its Select brand, which has been plagued with product recalls and more scandals. Oregon-based Dutchie is in another lawsuit. This time, they are suing Akerna over access to leaf data systems, which is used for seed-to-sale tracking in Pennsylvania. The lawsuit alleges that Akerna does not allow retailers to use any other point-of-sale system. And finally, on a sad note, Oregon OG Geek Farms is closing operations. They have built an amazing reputation for growing fantastic cannabis and being a great member of the community. Best wishes for their next journey. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Weed Talk News.
The growing pains of the cannabis industry aren't just being felt in the US. It's happening globally as well. One country overseas is seeing a big cut to the job market, while one of the biggest airports in the world says it's ready to crack down on weed. Lex Pelger has the details from Europe.
I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations with this week's European Cannabis Report from Weed Talk News. This week, 2 business stories and 2 prohibition stories. We begin with bad news for Portugal. At the Portugal facility of the Canadian cannabis giant Tilray, they will be cutting 25% of their workforce at their medical cannabis operation. Then, the Colombian cannabis company Clever Leaves will cut 21% of their employees at their Portugal facility. We've seen the slashing of jobs across North American cannabis companies, and so it's no surprise to see the cutbacks hitting the EU. In news from the war on drugs, an Albanian official was caught at the Macedonian border with 58 kilos of cannabis. Only 28 years old, but head of IT for the State Information Agency, she had used her government ID to get through checkpoints. With Albania trying to join the EU, but being labeled a narco state by some Western governments, how they deal with this situation will be closely watched. In the UK, similar news. After 11 different people have been charged with smuggling cannabis in just the last 2 weeks, Heathrow Airport said they will be stepping up their surveillance. The temptation for smugglers is high because California cannabis brings a premium on the London market. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations reporting for Weed Talk News.
Cannabis consumers and patients are no stranger to product recalls and changes to what they find on their shelves. Well, for those in Canada, there could be changes to some of the ingestible products you're used to seeing, as companies are being called out for their labeling. Debbie Facey has the details in our Canada report.
Hi, this is Debbie Facey from Weed Talk News, your Canadian correspondent, with your Canadian Tokes of the Week. This week in Canada, what we have going on, which isn't too much, but is one large enough realization, is the edibles concept. So what we had going on when it came to our rollout was a Cannabis 1.0, 2.0, and then it would be 3. But in this case, the 2.0 allowed most of the concentrates in. What that also had was the beverages and the edibles. When that came into play, some of the companies actually decided to not use cannabis as their main ingredient when it came to their edibles, but to use some sort of a concentrate. With that being used, that had not only upped the amount of THC percentage in the edible overall, but it has also made the edible a lot higher of a consumption rate compared to one that would be made with just cannabis. That being said, with the Health Canada wanting to readjust and realign the now noticeable extract being used in edibles, they're facing a fight when it comes to the illicit market becoming the main source for many of the cannabis consumers when it comes to now obtaining these products that were made with concentrates. That being said, Health Canada does have something to look at and to readjust and realign, but has to also take in mind what has also been in place for the last 2.5 to 3 years. The last and only other thing that is going on, unfortunately, in Canada as of right now, is the collide, or I should say, the hybrid of the Organic Dutchman, which is a Mississauga company in Ontario, Canada, and the Bazam company in BC, Vancouver. They have decided to come together, and that has led to the Green Organic Dutchman changing their name. For most consumers in Canada, we do know the Green Organic Dutchman as the beautiful green glass. With that, they haven't stated anything about their product changing, as in their packaging, but they have stated that they are going to be adapting the Bazam's name and be changing the name to align with both of the companies coming together. This is Debbie Facey with We Talk News, your Canadian correspondent.
Back in the US, more shops are coming to the Empire State. The New York Cannabis Control Board has approved 30 new retail licenses, bringing the total number statewide to 66. And regulators say more are on the way. Board member Ruben McDaniel says customers can expect to see several soft openings of these new locations over the next month and a half. But in Connecticut, it seems Republican lawmakers are trying to stop that new market in its tracks. This week, House Republicans introduced a bill with several proposals to make changes to the state's adult use market that just went into effect this month. The proposals include items like prohibiting sales of edible cannabis products, suspending retail sales until the state's drug recognition expert certification program is operational, even putting a THC cap on products. But since Democrats hold the House majority in Connecticut, it's not likely to pass. But this is why it's important to know who is running your government at the state level and where they stand on weed. Sticking with the East Coast, let's travel to Vermont for an update from our own Jessie Lynn Dolan.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. In the second month of retail adult use sales, Vermont November sales topped $3.8 million. Vermont Cannabis Control Board continues their peer networking series on February 2nd with a session on tax compliance with the Vermont Department of Taxes. The Cannabis Control Board meets on Monday, January 30th for their monthly meeting, including much anticipated license approvals, as this is the first month the board is meeting monthly rather than weekly for those meetings and approvals. On January 26th, Vermont Growers Association Grassroots Advocates held a virtual community meeting with a read-through of the proposed 2023 changes to Cannabis Control Board rules as we look towards several cannabis bills coming into legislative session in the coming weeks. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrols.com.
Next door in New Hampshire, efforts for an adult use market may not be lost. A new bill to legalize recreational cannabis for adults in New Hampshire is being backed by the ACLU of New Hampshire and a conservative group called Americans for Prosperity. It would also let people grow at home. New Hampshire remains the only state in New England without an adult use of cannabis market. Tim Egan, no longer a member of the House of Representatives there, sees a change in attitude by Republicans on cannabis. Egan is now the chairman of the Cannabis Advisory Board for New Hampshire and shared his thoughts on these renewed efforts.
When you talked about Republican nationally, I think you're seeing more and more of sort of the libertarian mindset of Republicans, those who are very sort of small government. And one of the things that in their mindset is I should be able to grow and consume cannabis if I want to. It's a sort of a libertarian mindset. So that's where I think you're seeing nationally Republicans being more pro-cannabis, where it used to be more of the hippie liberal Democrats.
Yeah. And it's nice to actually see them actually agree on something. And if it happens to be this plant medicine, I'm encouraged by that. That being said, how encouraged are you about getting some pro-cannabis legislation in New Hampshire passed?
I couldn't be more excited right now. As the chair of the House Cannabis Caucus the last 3 years, it was sort of a tough battle, but it's been refreshing. The piece of legislation that I had been working on, and if reelected, would have filed, I'm happy to say that was filed by our majority leader, Jason Osborne, our minority leader, Matt Wilhelm. So we have bipartisan support of this bill, House Bill 639. Also, what is very rare is when House bills are filed to have co-sponsors be senators. We actually have 3 senators on it as co-sponsors as well. They testified just yesterday at the House when the bill was introduced to the Department of Commerce. That's another part that makes us really excited, is that it was actually put in front of commerce. Usually cannabis bills are put in front of public safety, and it's a lot about what is this going to mean for our kids and DUI and all those topics. Well, all those are equally important issues, but commerce is going to look at it as an economic development play, as a job creation play, as a scientific research play, looking at the cannabinoid plant and saying, what else can we do with it besides it being something that you can enjoy like alcohol, or you could use medicinally if you were really a serious patient. But how else can we leverage this cannabinoid plant? So these kind of combination of factors are very exciting.
In neighboring Massachusetts, changes could be coming as well, but only if you are a worker or employer. We Talk News producer Tori Chamberlain has this week's Bay State Report.
Hey guys, I'm Tori Chamberlain, and this is your Bay State Report. Massachusetts lawmakers recently filed a slew of cannabis-related measures to build on the already successful and huge market here. Dan Adams of the Boston Globe did a great job of summarizing what some of these measures would entail. They span from banning the firing of employees over failed THC tests, making it easier to expunge cannabis-related criminal charges, and the aptly named Act to Facilitate Labor Peace Among the Cannabis Workforce, which would require licensed cannabis facilities to allow workers to vote on unionizing. This is big news considering how many major companies that operate here in Massachusetts have had lawsuits filed against them, whether here or in other states, related to worker unionization. And these other measures would, of course, help all other consumers and patients here in Massachusetts. So I'll be keeping an eye out on what passes in the state legislature and what doesn't. That does it for the Bay State Report. I'm Tori Chamberlain.
Traveling to New Jersey now, where the Garden State may really be living up to its name. There are reports legislation regarding a person's ability to grow cannabis for personal use will finally be addressed, well after an adult use market has been established. So here's Jill Goldsberry with the details.
Good day, everyone. I'm Jill Goldsberry, and this is what's happening in New Jersey cannabis. A lot of news to pack in, so we'll just jump right in. According to the CRC, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission of New Jersey is set to be the home of new consumption lounges starting as early as this year. But wait, don't get too excited, because there will be rules and restrictions. After all, it's New Jersey. What would it be without rules and restrictions, right? First of all, lounges must be attached to a retail licensed dispensary. Therefore, one cannot open a standalone cannabis lounge without having a cannabis retail license. In addition, both the township, which the dispensary and the proposed lounge is to be located, and the Cannabis Regulatory Commission must approve the application for the cannabis lounge. That being said, lounges would operate similar to the way a brewery operates, where the lounge cannot sell food or drinks on site, but patrons can bring or order outside food or drinks, excluding alcoholic beverages, of course, and tobacco. You can also bring your own THC products to consume, and consumers from out of state are also able to bring their own THC products. And that, my friend, is where it will get a little complicated. So we will keep you posted on what's going on with consumption lounges in New Jersey and keep you updated. And now shifting gears to another legal issue in New Jersey. Can New Jersey residences grow their own private stash of marijuana? Currently, no. But pretty soon, this may be a possibility. What we're seeing this year is a proposed revamp of this situation. This year, the Senate Bill number 3438 was proposed to increase the THC cap. Currently, as a refresh, the state allows no more than 30% of cannabis flower and 60% of concentration or solid liquid concentrate sold under the state. So possession of up to 6 ounces of cannabis is legal for adult use possession, and there are presently no caps on potency of THC in New Jersey. And what we're currently seeing is there is a proposed cap. The state has several bills under review, including bill number S353, which was introduced back in November 2022 by Senator Vin Gopal of Ocean Township. And this bill, number S353, is proposing legalizing the growth and possession of up to 6 marijuana plants for personal or recreational use, and up to 10 plants for personal or medical use by a person 21 years of age or older. So that is what's being proposed. If this does go through, we will be able to grow our own personal stash in New Jersey. We'll keep you posted on this. I'm Jill Goldsberry with We Talk News. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.
Meanwhile, numbers are up in Michigan, not in price, but in sales. Michigan NORML Executive Director Rick Thompson continues our coast-to-coast roundup.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Medical cannabis sales rose a startling 9% in December to set a new single-month sales record of $221 million. Medical sales were down 1.1%, and adult use sales were up 9.7% over November 2022. Although medical marijuana sales seem to have plateaued at the $13 to $16 million level during the last few months, Detroit's new adult use program is just now coming online, and many millions of dollars will eventually be recorded as recreational sales instead of medical. The price of cannabis continues to fall like the roach out of a car window, as the average per pound price dropped 4.7% to about $14.51. Now, if you know, you know, but there's 16 ounces in a pound, and that makes the average per ounce price in Michigan about $90. Now, this consumer's paradise is a retailer's nightmare. A $1 million deal to develop a property in Saline has been canceled by Loom. The company had received all the go-aheads needed to finish the project, but then backed out. The original concept was a new dispo building and developing other usable space on the property, and it's that additional space which has Loom nixing the deal, a company spokesperson says, as doing that planned development would be much more difficult and expensive than original projections had imagined. Now, this is a project they wanted badly, too. It has a coveted Michigan Avenue address, and they way overbid the asking price. Property was originally listed for $817,000, and Loom threw a straight mill at him, which is about $182,000 more than the asking price. Now, guess who gets screwed the worst in this deal? That's the property owner. See, Saline has a lot of new dispos coming online, and because of the buffer zones, this property is no longer eligible for a cannabis retail business, according to MLive. So long, $800,000 property value. Also in the epic fail category is Skymint, the state's most hated brand name, who is in default on payments to their real estate investment trust overlords, Innovative Industrial Properties. The default concerns an under construction site intended for a major cultivation facility. The Urinal Mint brand is in compliance with all their other properties and payments, according to the IIPR quarterly statement, which might indicate they're finally going to stop constructing new grow houses in Michigan. The market's saturated, dudes. Get a clue. Hey, heads up, cannabis business people. Here's a few names to listen for and to be cautious of. Christopher Woods, Renaissance Solutions, and Terrapin. In 2020, Woods raised $9 million from Colorado investors to start a retail store, processing facility, and cultivation center in Grand Rapids under the Terrapin name. Woods is the majority owner of Terrapin. In January 2022, when it looked like the business was not going to be successful, Terrapin started taking profits out of the company, milking it for all it was worth, which directly benefited Woods more than anyone. Terrapins began overpaying the Renaissance Solutions management team by $1 million a year. And guess who owns that one? Yep, Woods again. By September 2022, the game was up and Terrapin was shutting down operations. And all those upfront investors who ponied up the cash to get started, they got screwed. Well, when it comes to screwing, the giver can also be the receiver. And Woods himself is going to take it hard because the bilked investors filed a lawsuit in Colorado alleging breach of contract and civil theft by Woods. Now, the paper trail's pretty convincing. We'll bring you more on this lawsuit as it progresses over the coming year, but you can expect to hear about other investor-initiated lawsuits over failed cannabis businesses in Michigan. Now for some reporting on a different type of crime. Last week, the Cannabis Regulatory Agency issued a warning about thefts for cannabis retailers who use delivery drivers. In at least 13 different incidents, cannabis delivery people pulled up to a residential home to make a drop-off and were ambushed by thieves with guns. Now they take the cannabis, the money, and sometimes even the delivery person's car. Those 13 incidents took place during just a 6-week period from December into January. Although the CRA hasn't offered any tips or advice on how to avoid having your delivery drivers beaten and robbed, the bulletin issued by the agency does remind license holders that they have 24 hours in which to report those incidents to the state regulatory agency. I guess that's the best they can do. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
Efforts for equity in the Show Me State are starting to show up. BioLastal is now the only Black-owned shop serving medical patients in downtown St. Louis. So let's check in with Brandon Jones for more happening in Missouri this week.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones from B Green Distribution with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And that's right, Viola finally opened their first location here in downtown St. Louis for our first minority-owned dispensary here in the state. Very happy to see it. There are a couple manufacturing licenses. One is Missouri Wellness, that also is a minority veteran-owned company here in the state as well. One of the big cases that actually happened this week was the first expungement case happened. Adam was actually released. He was sentenced to 5 years for a little over an ounce of cannabis. He was 3 years into his sentence and got released just this week. They had a nice food drive and clothing drive. I actually dropped off some stuff for myself over at Kansas City Cannabis here in Kansas City. So if you have any extra clothing, he is the size large and would use anything that help him get back on his feet. Like I said, he went in when he was only 18 years old, did 3 years for less than 2 ounces of cannabis. So we are only, a couple weeks away from February 6th when adult sales for recreation are going to happen here in Missouri too. So things are really starting to get crazy. A lot of events are getting ready to happen. So it's a great time to be here in Kansas City, seeing the cannabis world take over here. It's really fun. So anybody, stay educated, stay medicated. Brandon Jones from Big Green Distribution. Have a great week.
Let's travel next door to Illinois now for an update from Thomas Howard.
In Illinois this week, lots of things happened. So the lottery that they're going to have for dispensaries anywhere in the United States, yeah, that has been extended to March 3rd. So now you have an extra 2 weeks to play the lottery if you're eligible. For more on that, you can go check out Cannabis Legalization News. We did a bit on it, and then Miggy and I are going to be actually applying because he's eligible and I live in Illinois. After that, the big news that came out just within the hour today, the deadline that was pending for 39 non-operative craft growers to be operational by practically next month, March of 2023, has been elongated to February of 2024, meaning that the prices of these craft grower licenses will be going up until perhaps more licenses are released later this year after perhaps a settlement or some resolution of the craft grower super case that is currently pending in Cook County. That's really all the news we have in the state of Illinois this week. Please join us on Sundays for Cannabis Legalization News with me and then my co-host Miggy. Back to you, Elena.
And finally, we started the episode with the FDA. Why not end with them? While the agency may not be willing to make a move on CBD just yet, it is issuing some other new guidance about clinical cannabis research on humans. The new guidance outlines how researchers can conduct clinical trials for certain substances containing cannabis or cannabis-derived compounds without breaking federal law. This move really solidifies what was written into the 2018 Farm Act, that low cannabis concentration hemp is no longer considered cannabis, meaning it's no longer an illegal Schedule I substance and can be used for research. And for that THC-rich cannabis that people want to research, you used to only be able to get this grown at the University of Mississippi. But this new guidance allows for the use of other sources authorized by the DEA to provide Schedule I cannabis materials for research. This is big news for the future of cannabis. While we wait for the feds to slash that Schedule I status altogether, it's nice to see we're at least opening more doors for researchers to learn about this plant. If we find out how to sign up as a volunteer, we will let you know. After all, it's a whole new world of weed out there, right? But remember to use it wisely. That's it for this week's Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weegits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
Which at first I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm an activist, but I have, held a bullhorn on the State House steps. I have frequently testified before the Cannabis Control Commission in the state legislature, and I'm not, shy about criticizing where I see, mistakes being made. So yeah, I think that's what differentiates me, just an appreciation for the plant. And then also I'm a cannabis entrepreneur myself. I've started businesses, so I've lived that entrepreneurial journey. I know how hard it is. It is absolutely a marathon, not a sprint. So I think that, I'm in the game, not just on the sidelines.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu, so it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.